Hello and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Miranda Mills and today I'm doing my first booktube tag. So I watched Lauren Wade's video on the dilemmas facing a book nerd tag, and I thought it was really fun and I thought it would be a great idea to join in. So I think the dilemmas of a book nerd tag first originated on Lindsay's Little Library channel. So I'll link both to Lindsay's video and to Lauren's video in the description box down below, so you can check out those videos too. And I'll also put the questions on the 10 dilemmas that face book bibliophiles in the description box. So if you want to, you can look at the questions and answer them. I'm so new to the booktube world that I won't tag individual booktubers to take part in this. So if you would like to do it, then please just consider yourself tagged and let me know if you do a video on this, because I would love to see it. And if you don't want to do a video but you want to answer the questions, then I'd love to read your answers. Just pop them in a comment down below where I can check them out. But let's get on with the tag. So for this tag, 10 dilemmas that often face book nerds have been highlighted. The first dilemma is dilemma number 1, book storage. How do you store and organize your books? My books are not very organised. I'm at my office in Hammersmith at the moment, which is why I've just got a few books here looking nice and tidy. But if you watch my other YouTube videos, then you'll see my little office at home in those videos, and you'll notice that the bookshelves behind me are absolutely crammed full of books. But unfortunately for me, that's just the reality of living in London and being such a book lover myself. I buy a lot of books and I store a lot of books, but I don't have a lot of space. So the result of that is that I do have very crammed shelves, and I have bookcases basically wherever I possibly can in the flat. So the books are on bookcases, happily, but the shelves aren't the tidiest, I must admit. I do generally try to keep certain genres together, for instance, so all of my vintage children's books I keep in my bedroom, and I do keep some publishers together, like I do try to keep my Persephone books together, although as you can see there are some here, so they do get separated out a bit. I do try to keep my slightly foxed books together too, but I've never been one to overly organise my shelves. I've never done alphabetical order. I have never tried to arrange books by colour or anything fancy like that, because frankly I just have too many of them. I am also very lucky in that all of my childhood books are stored for me by my dad in New York. So when my parents moved from New York when I was a teenager, a lot of our things got left behind in storage there, including my childhood books. And my dad very kindly still has them in storage for me in New York, which I'm very grateful for, because I would hate to give them all up, and my dream is certainly to be reunited with them one day and have all of my books under one roof. That really is the dream. Dilemma number 2, tracking. How do you keep track of what you read and what books you own? I don't keep track of what books I own. I wish I could be that organised. I know some people have very impressive Excel documents on all of the books that they own. I'm afraid I'm not that person. I have tried over the years to keep a written record of the books that I've read, but I've never been particularly successful with keeping up with that. In all honesty, what I enjoy the most is Instagram. I have a dedicated books only Bookstagram account, which is called Miranda's Bookcase. I'll link to it in the description box if you want to check it out. And on that account, I photograph all of the books that I'm reading and loving and collecting, and I really enjoy sharing pictures of my book collection on there and my thoughts about the books that I read on Instagram. I did also recently get this book, which is called The Reading Journal, and it's made by Fraser and Parsley, which is a company that does some of my favourite stationery. They're a lovely independent company, and they do beautiful cards and notebooks like this one. And this is the perfect little journal for readers. I'll show you one of the blank pages inside, so you can hopefully see that. So it has space for the title, author, genre, reading date, publication date, who the book was recommended or given by, a section for my thoughts and notes, and then a little bit at the bottom for favourite quotes. I've started keeping a record of the books I'm reading in this, and I'm really enjoying using this. I like that there's a lot of space to write down my thoughts and favourite quotes from the book. And because a lot of the books I read, I may very well end up interviewing the authors for my podcast, Tea and Tattle podcast. Because of that, I like to keep more notes on the books that I've read, so it's just easier to recall facts about them, like names of characters, for instance, more quickly. And I find that if I write about a book immediately after I've read it, then I also just remember the book a lot better too. So I'm finding that to be a really useful practice, to be trying to keep this reading journal, and it's just a really beautiful journal to use too, so that also makes me happy. Dilemma number 3 on borrowing. Do you lend your books out? No, absolutely not. And I know that probably sounds a bit mean. I honestly only stopped lending my books to people about a year ago, and why I stopped doing that is it's because I don't think I've ever had a good experience of lending my books. Normally, I love to share things that I love. Sharing is part of the pleasure for me, but I found that I got really upset when people either didn't return the books that I lent to them, or they returned them in really shoddy shape. And I'm very fussy about how I keep my books. I really like to keep them in as pristine condition as possible. So I realised that no friendship needed the strain of me lending my books to people, and now I just won't do it. I also now obviously won't borrow books either, because if I'm not going to reciprocate, then it just isn't fair. So yes, that's the answer to that one. Dilemma number 4 on book buying. How do you buy or acquire your books? Well, I'm so lucky living in London because there are so many fabulous independent bookshops that I love to frequent. It's my favourite thing to do on a Saturday when I just want to have fun and relax. I'll pick a bookshop to go to, often with my mum, and we'll have loads of fun browsing in the bookshop and then going somewhere for tea and cake afterwards. That really is my ideal Saturday morning scenario. So I buy a lot of books in bookshops. That's my favourite way to buy books. I just love browsing. I love being able to look at a book first to see if I really enjoy it. I like to feel that I'm supporting independent businesses and authors in that way. I do also order some books online. I like to use Blackwell's for ordering online, and if I really need to, then I will use Amazon, especially for instance if they're books from abroad that might be difficult to get any other way, then I will order from Amazon. But I do genuinely try to not order much from Amazon, and I really do make a determined effort to buy books from independent bookshops or small chain bookshops. I also go to a lot of Oxfam bookshops in London and pick up a lot of secondhand books that way. There are also some incredible vintage bookshops in London too, and I love to go exploring in them as well and hopefully finding some treasures. But yes, that's definitely my favourite way to shop for books, in bookshops. I am also lucky in that I'm sent books from publishers. I don't generally ever write to publishers asking for books, but sometimes publishers will get in touch with me and they'll ask if they can send me a book. I don't accept everything. I try and be quite picky about what I accept from publishers because I want to give myself a chance to actually be able to read all the books that are sent to me. And so I don't accept that many, but I still consider myself very lucky to be sent some books by publishers, and it's lovely when that happens as well. Dilemma number 5, comments. How do you respond to the "how do you read so much" comment or similar comments? Well, the way I respond is that I say I really dedicate time to reading. So yes, I read every day, but I don't just read in snatched fragments of time. So yes, I do read last thing at night before going to sleep. I read on my commute, when I'm journeying through London on the tube. But those aren't the only occasions in which I read. I really do dedicate some serious hours to reading every week. And I think that's actually an important point to make. If you are trying to read more, then I always recommend carving out some serious time for yourself. I think it's when you have 2 or 3 hours ahead of you just to lose yourself in a book, then that's when the magic really happens. Because I think you need that kind of time to get fully drawn in, to be fully immersed in the world of a book. And then you'll amaze yourself by how quickly you read and how much you manage to read. So I do take my reading seriously. I carve out many evenings that I spend reading, and I also, if I need to, for instance, if I'm interviewing a lot of authors on my podcast and I need to read a lot of books, then I will devote a whole day over the weekend to reading. So yes, I do read a lot, but that's because I consciously make the choice to read a lot, and I consciously think about the time that I spend reading, and I make sure I have enough of that time. Dilemma number 6, how to pick your next book. How do you pick your next read? Well, I love picking my next read. I mean, it honestly never poses anxiety for me. Perhaps because I love to shop in bookshops so much. I'm always browsing amongst gorgeous new books. It's the only reason it might be difficult to decide what to read next is because I have so many choices. But my podcast will often dictate what I read next, so I'm always looking out for books, for instance, that I think would be interesting to my audience, whose authors I might want to interview. So that definitely informs the reading choices that I make. Personal taste does as well. I love literature, especially from the first half of the 20th century. I love mysteries of the type of Golden Age style mysteries. I love historical fiction. I love certain publishers like Persephone Books and Slightly Fox, so I always love to add their newest titles to my shelves and try to read those. Another factor that affects my choice and what I'm going to read next is definitely the seasons. So with winter coming up, for instance, I know I'm going to want to read some of those snowbound in a country mansion mysteries that are so great to read in December. And generally over the winter, I will read books that reflect the season in some way. So whether there are books about snow and ice or Gothic mansions or whatever, definitely the seasons will influence what I read. Dilemma number 7, travel. How do you pick what books you bring on vacation with you? Okay, so when I go on vacation, I am the type of person who generally chooses city breaks a lot more over beach breaks. So when I'm on holiday, I often don't actually have time to read that much. The most time I have to read when I'm vacationing is really the travel time, so on flights or on trains. And in those situations, I really want a book that is gripping and fast-paced, that I know I'll just quickly get immersed in the world and will really want to keep reading and will provide excellent distraction. So I've definitely made mistakes with books I take on holiday in the past. I mean, just last summer when I went to New York, a friend of mine wanted me to read War and Peace with him, so I thought it'd be a good idea to bring War and Peace on the holiday, and it was not a good idea. That was not an ideal book for me to read on holiday. So yes, I think I've learned from that. I've learned that I much prefer slim, light, quick reads that are easy to digest and that will just hold my attention easily, but also because I don't always have much time to read, it's all right if I have to put them down and pick them up a lot and, not have the time I normally would to really get immersed in a book. I need the sorts of reads that can stand up to that. So Agatha Christie, for instance, would be an ideal choice for holiday reading. And if any of you are traveling anywhere this winter and you haven't read And Then There Were None Yet, I highly recommend that one. I can guarantee it will pull you in and will be a riveting read for your train journey or flight or whatever rather boring mode of transport you might have ahead of you. Dilemma number 8 on annotating books. Do you write or highlight or mark up your books in any way? Absolutely not. That probably hasn't come as a surprise, as I have already mentioned that I am very fussy about the condition my books are in. I like them to be as pristine as possible, and I'm one of those people it does actually almost physically hurt to think of turning over the pages in a book. I don't like writing in books, highlighting, no. Unless they're study books, then no. I will not touch a book. But sometimes, yes, I do want to make notes on what I'm reading. So especially if I'm reading a book I know I'm going to have to review, or I'm reading a book whose author I'm going to be interviewing, then I know I want to make notes as I'm reading. And then what I do is I use a notebook. And generally my notebook of choice is a Persephone notebook. I love their notebooks that are just blank pages inside, but they look like a Persephone book. And I will make notes in this. So instead of marking up a book, I will just make the notes and write down quotes I like in this book. And I find that that works really well for me. I will often also carry around some little sticky notepads with me that I can just mark pages easily in a book if I want to refer back to it later, and then I can just take them out without damaging the book at all. Dilemma number 9 on new or backlisted books. Which do you prefer, new releases or backlist books? Well, I like both, but habitually I'm definitely much more of a backlist reader. This is a habit I've had since childhood even. When I was little, I collected the vintage chalet school books by Eleanor M. Brent Dyer, which is a series of boarding school stories set in the sort of 1920s, 1930s, right up until the 50s and 60s. And it's about a boarding school that was based first in Austria, but then it sort of travels around the world a little bit. But I loved those books when I was young. I still have many of my vintage editions that I collected. And I do love the feeling of discovering a book that feels like a forgotten classic, a sort of lost treasure. So there definitely is a delight in reading books like that to me. I'm also lucky because my mum has been a huge reader all her life, so she's recommended and passed down to me many books that she loved when she was young that aren't necessarily in print anymore or might be harder to find now. I'm a big fan of publishing companies like Persephone Books that republishes forgotten classics, or Slightly Fox that republishes a lot of forgotten memoirs. So I'm definitely more of a backlist reader. However, I would say since joining Bookstagram and since starting Tea and Tattle podcast, on which I interview a lot of female writers, I have started to read many more new releases. And that's been a really big pleasure. It's opened up my eyes to new genres, for instance, that I didn't realize I would enjoy. An example of that is my love for nature writing, which has really developed over the past couple of years. And that is definitely because there are so many gorgeous inside and out nature books that have been coming out lately. And I've become really passionate about reading nature writing. And that's been a huge pleasure to me recently. So I'm definitely starting to read more new releases now, which I find exciting. And the final dilemma, dilemma number 10, on sequels. Do you read books as they are released or wait for an entire series to be published before reading the first book? I definitely will read books in a series as they are released. I'm old enough to remember having had to wait for each of His Dark Materials trilogy by Philip Pullman to be released. I also had to wait for every Harry Potter book to be released when I was young. And I just still remember the excitement of when the latest in the series would come out, and I would sort of rush to the bookshop and buy it and then just devote days to reading it, because especially with the Harry Potter books, as you know, by the end they just get thicker and thicker, and so it would take longer to read them, but I would just gobble them up still. So I think that sense of excitement has remained with me, and I still really enjoy the anticipation of waiting for a book to come out. And I also think with audiobooks now, it's great because if you've been enjoying a series but there's a bit of a gap between the last book and the newest book and you've forgotten details about the storyline or the characters, then what I like to do is get the books on Audible, and then I'll just listen to them and catch myself up that way before reading the newest book in the series. Having said that, I have to admit, though, that at the moment, I don't think there is a series that has really captivated me to that extent, in which I'm just so anxious to get the next book, which is a shame. If any of you have any recommendations for series that you absolutely love, then please let me know. Okay, and that's it, all 10 dilemmas. I actually found that a really fun tag to do. I'm really happy I joined in with that. And if you would like to join in as well, then like I said, please consider yourself tagged. Or if you don't want to make a video, but you do want to answer the questions, then please pop your answers in the comment box so I can read them. I've listed all the questions in the description box. But thanks so much for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed my answers. If you did, please do give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. But I'll be back again very soon with another video. Bye!